A single video changed everything for America's fastest woman. One moment, Sha'Carri Richardson was Nike's golden girl. The next, she was in handcuffs at Seattle Airport, with her multi-million-dollar empire crumbling around her. The footage that surfaced shows the exact moment when years of building her brand came crashing down in the most public way possible. What started as a simple argument with her boyfriend Christian Coleman escalated into a scene that had sponsors scrambling and fans questioning everything they thought they knew about the track star. The woman who once symbolized resilience and comeback stories was now facing her biggest challenge yet, and this time, no amount of speed could help her outrun the consequences. The details that emerged painted a disturbing picture that went far beyond a typical couple's argument. Witnesses reported seeing Richardson become increasingly aggressive toward Coleman, with airport security eventually stepping in after multiple travelers complained about the escalating situation. What makes this even more complicated is Coleman's own controversial past in athletics. But this time, he wasn't the one making headlines for the wrong reasons. The police report revealed that Richardson allegedly struck Coleman multiple times before security intervened, leading to her arrest on domestic violence charges. Sources close to the couple suggest this wasn't an isolated incident, with friends reportedly expressing concerns about their relationship dynamic for months leading up to the airport confrontation. According to eyewitness accounts, the confrontation began near the departure gate, where Richardson and Coleman were allegedly arguing about something on his phone. Several passengers described hearing raised voices before the situation turned physical, with Richardson reportedly grabbing Coleman's device and throwing it to the ground. What shocked onlookers was how quickly Richardson's demeanor shifted from verbal frustration to physical aggression, with one witness describing her as completely unhinged in those crucial moments. The airport's busy terminal meant dozens of people witnessed the altercation, including families with children who were visibly disturbed by what they were seeing unfold. Security footage, which hasn't been released publicly but was described in the police report, allegedly shows Richardson pushing Coleman against a wall before striking him across the face multiple times. What made the situation even more volatile was Coleman's apparent reluctance to defend himself or retaliate, instead trying to de-escalate while Richardson continued her attack. Airport security officers described having to physically restrain Richardson, who allegedly continued screaming at Coleman even while being handcuffed. The entire incident lasted approximately 8 minutes from start to finish. But those few minutes captured on multiple phones would prove to be career-defining for the sprinter. Perhaps most troubling are the reports from people within their inner circle who claim this type of behavior wasn't entirely unexpected. Sources suggest Richardson had displayed controlling tendencies and explosive anger in private settings, with some friends expressing relief that the issue was finally being addressed publicly. One anonymous source close to the couple described previous incidents where Richardson had allegedly damaged Coleman's property during arguments and had become increasingly possessive about his interactions with other people. These revelations paint a picture of a pattern of behavior rather than a single moment of poor judgment, which makes Richardson's subsequent apology and claims about getting help seem more calculated than genuine. The cell phone footage that went viral within hours showed Richardson in a light that completely contradicted her carefully crafted public image. In the grainy video, you can see her shoving Coleman before the situation rapidly deteriorates, with bystanders clearly uncomfortable and moving away from the escalating confrontation. What's particularly damaging is how the video captures Richardson's demeanor throughout the incident, showing someone who appeared to be completely out of control. The audio, though muffled, allegedly captures language that directly contradicts the composed, inspirational figure Nike had been promoting across their campaigns. Social media exploded with reactions, and the hashtag demanding Nike drop Richardson began trending within hours, putting unprecedented pressure on the sportswear giant to take action. The most damaging aspect of the footage wasn't just what it showed, but how it completely shattered the narrative Richardson had spent years building about overcoming adversity with grace and determination. The video begins with what appears to be a normal conversation between the couple. But within seconds, you can see Richardson's body language shift dramatically as she becomes increasingly animated and aggressive, her facial expressions clearly visible despite the phone's distance, show a level of rage that many viewers found genuinely frightening, especially contrasted against Coleman's apparent attempts to calm her down and create distance. What made the video particularly viral was how it captured other travelers' reactions in real time, with parents pulling their children away and business travelers stopping to record what was unfolding. You can actually see the moment when multiple people simultaneously reached for their phones, realizing they were witnessing something that would become major news. The video quality, while not perfect, was clear enough to show Richardson's face during the most aggressive moments, making it impossible for her team to later claim mistaken identity or dispute the authenticity of what people were seeing. The audio proved equally devastating for Richardson's image, with lip readers and audio enhancement experts later analyzing what could be heard over the airport noise. Reports suggest the language captured included profanity-laced threats and personal attacks that painted Richardson as the clear aggressor throughout the confrontation. What's particularly damaging is how the audio allegedly captures Richardson making statements that directly contradict her public persona as someone who promotes mental health awareness and positive relationships. Some of the reported language was so harsh that major news outlets refused to quote it directly, instead describing it as extremely inappropriate and shocking coming from someone in her position. The speed at which the video spread across social media platforms was unprecedented, even by today's standards of instant viral content. Within the first hour, the original video had been shared thousands of times across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, with users adding their own commentary about how disappointed they were in Richardson. The hashtag #DropSha'Carri began trending nationally within 3 hours, accompanied by hashtag Nike Accountability and hashtag Domestic Violence Matters. What amplified the damage was how users began creating side-by-side comparisons of the airport footage with Richardson's Nike commercials, highlighting the stark contrast between her inspirational marketing message and her real-world behavior. Perhaps most telling was how quickly the narrative shifted from supporting Richardson as someone who had overcome obstacles to questioning whether her previous controversies had been warning signs that were ignored. The video became a catalyst for deeper discussions about her past behavior, with people analyzing previous interviews and appearances for signs of the aggressive personality that was now on full display. The visual evidence was so compelling that it became nearly impossible for Richardson's supporters to defend her actions, fundamentally changing the public conversation about her character and whether she deserved the platform and financial rewards that came with her athletic success. Behind closed doors, Nike executives found themselves in an impossible position that threatened to damage their brand reputation regardless of their decision. The company had just featured Richardson prominently in their latest campaign, celebrating female empowerment, making the timing of the incident particularly problematic for their messaging. Internal sources suggest heated discussions took place about whether to immediately distance themselves from Richardson or wait for more details to emerge. The pressure intensified when several high-profile women's rights organizations publicly called for Nike to reconsider their partnership, arguing that keeping Richardson would send the wrong message about accountability. What complicated matters further was Richardson's significant social media following and her status as one of track and field's biggest draws, making her removal potentially costly from both a financial and marketing perspective. The emergency boardroom meetings at Nike headquarters reportedly lasted well into the night as executives grappled with a crisis that had no clear resolution. Sources within the company describe a deeply divided room, with some executives arguing for immediate action to protect Nike's brand integrity, while others pushed for a more measured response that wouldn't rush to judgment before all facts emerged. What made the decision even more complex was Richardson's unique position as one of the few track and field athletes who had genuine mainstream crossover appeal, making her valuable not just for athletic credibility, but for reaching younger demographics that Nike desperately wanted to maintain. The legal department's involvement added another layer of complexity to the discussions, as lawyers examined the specific clauses in Richardson's contract that might allow for termination based on criminal charges or behavior that damages Nike's reputation. However, the contract reportedly included significant financial penalties for Nike if they terminated the deal without sufficient cause, potentially costing the company millions in buyout payments. This created a perverse incentive structure where keeping Richardson might be financially preferable to cutting ties, even if it damaged Nike's public image. The legal team also had to consider the precedent any decision would set for future athlete controversies. Knowing that their handling of Richardson would influence how other sponsors and athletes viewed Nike's commitment to their partnerships, public relations experts brought in to advise Nike painted a grim picture regardless of which direction the company chose. Keeping Richardson risked alienating female consumers and advocacy groups who had become increasingly vocal about corporate accountability in cases of domestic violence. However, dropping her immediately could expose Nike to criticism about rushing to judgment and potentially abandoning an athlete who deserved due process. The PR team's research showed that Nike's core demographic was split almost evenly on how the company should respond, making it impossible to satisfy everyone and guaranteeing backlash no matter what decision they made. The situation became even more complicated when competing brands began making subtle moves to position themselves as more ethically conscious alternatives to Nike. Adidas and Under Armour representatives were reportedly reaching out to other Nike-sponsored athletes, suggesting that Nike's handling of controversial situations might not align with their personal values. This competitive pressure meant that Nike wasn't just managing one athlete's crisis, but potentially defending their entire roster of endorsers who might question whether Nike would support them through their own future controversies. What made the decision timeline even more critical was Nike's upcoming earnings call and several major marketing campaigns that featured Richardson prominently. The company faced the prospect of either pulling expensive advertising that had already been produced and scheduled, or continuing to promote an athlete who was facing serious criminal charges. Marketing executives calculated that reshooting campaigns and finding replacement athletes could cost upwards of $10 million, not including the lost investment in Richardson's specific brand development over the previous years. The financial implications extended beyond immediate costs, as Richardson's removal could affect Nike's position in track and field sponsorship deals and their ability to attract future high-profile athletes who might view the company as quick to abandon their partners. Internal communications allegedly revealed frustration among Nike executives about how Richardson's team had handled the crisis, with some suggesting that better damage control immediately after the incident might have given Nike more options for managing the fallout. The company's previous experience with controversial athletes had taught them the importance of coordinated responses, but Richardson's legal team appeared to be prioritizing her criminal defense over brand management, leaving Nike to navigate the public relations disaster largely on their own. This disconnect between Richardson's priorities and Nike's needs created additional tension in discussions about whether the partnership could survive, even if the immediate controversy passed. Richardson's reported $20 million Nike deal through 2028 represents just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to her earning potential and what's now hanging in the balance. Beyond Nike, she had partnerships with several other major brands, appearance fees that could reach six figures per event, and social media endorsement deals that collectively formed a financial empire built on her image as an inspirational figure. Industry insiders estimate her total annual earning potential at over $5 million, with the Nike contract serving as the foundation that made other deals possible. The ripple effect of losing her primary sponsor could trigger clauses in other contracts that allow brands to exit their agreements, potentially costing Richardson tens of millions over the next few years. What makes this situation even more precarious is how her marketability was largely built on overcoming adversity. But domestic violence allegations create a completely different type of controversy that's much harder to recover from. Richardson's carefully scripted apology video appeared calculated to save her career, but many questioned whether it was too little, too late to repair the damage. Speaking directly to the camera with what appeared to be genuine emotion, she acknowledged making mistakes while stopping short of admitting to the specific allegations that led to her arrest. Her legal team's influence was evident in how carefully she worded her statement, avoiding any language that could be used against her in court, while trying to maintain some connection with her fan base. The video emphasized her commitment to personal growth and getting help, but critics immediately pointed out how it focused more on her career concerns than taking full responsibility for her actions. What's particularly telling is how she addressed her sponsors directly in the statement, suggesting she was well aware of how precarious her financial situation had become and was desperately trying to preserve those relationships. The athletic world's response revealed deep divisions about accountability, second chances, and the different standards applied to male versus female athletes in similar situations. Several prominent track and field athletes remained notably silent, while others used the opportunity to distance themselves from Richardson without directly criticizing her. Competing brands saw an opportunity to position themselves as more ethically conscious, with some making subtle social media posts about their values and standards for partnerships. What's particularly interesting is how some former Nike athletes who had faced their own controversies weighed in, with mixed messages about whether Richardson deserved the same consideration they had received. The situation has also sparked broader conversations about domestic violence in sports and whether the industry does enough to address these issues before they become public scandals. The long-term implications extend far beyond Richardson's immediate legal troubles, potentially reshaping how major brands approach athlete partnerships in an era of instant social media judgment. Nike's handling of this situation will likely influence their future contract negotiations and the behavioral clauses they include in endorsement deals. For Richardson, even if she avoids serious legal consequences, rebuilding her brand will require years of consistent behavior and strategic rehabilitation that may never fully restore her previous earning potential. The track and field world was watching closely to see whether this incident marks the end of her dominance or becomes another comeback story, though the nature of domestic violence allegations makes the latter scenario significantly more challenging. What remains unclear is whether the public will separate her athletic achievements from her personal controversies, or if this moment will define how she's remembered, regardless of any future success on the track.